Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Hangouts and Headlines. I'm very excited to be with you again for the third week in a row, I believe, trying to get on a regular cadence here. So thank you so much for joining me. I know it's been different days of the week each time, but midweek, 10 a.m. Eastern, every time. I'm pretty proud of getting it done on that cadence. I'm going to try to keep this up as long as I can, even though there was a Nintendo Direct this morning that I watched with my daughters. But I'm excited to be here talking about the really important stuff, like how American companies try to sell blue jeans to you and how that has offended certain parties and maybe not offended those parties. And that's a part of the conversation as well. So if you're just joining us for the first time, this is a Hangouts and Headlines. This is not a virtual legality. We do a Hangout section before we get into the headlines. We'll probably be doing this for about 20 or 30 minutes. But if you are in chat right now live with me, let me know how you're doing. Let me know how the weather is. Let me know whether or not you're excited about this particular conversation, and we will get into it. Before we do that, though, I did want to mention that I did a virtual legality last week as well as a Hangouts and Headlines. And one of the things I did at the front of that video, because of the subject matter of that video, was ask people to put in comments to YouTube, thinking that that video in particular would be not demonetized, not struck necessarily, but pressed down upon by the algorithm because of what we wound up talking about in that video. And I'm very happy to say that even though there are early indications of that virtual legality episode being squashed a little bit by the algorithm at the start, there were so many comments that came in so fast that I think the YouTube robots just wound up liking the video. It's our most popular in a number of years here on the channel. And I really appreciate everybody that took the steps to put those comments on this video. I'm going to make it a part of the ask when I make this content now in the future, because YouTube just seems to be responding to comments more than likes, more than anything right now. If anything pops up as part of our conversation that you have a thought on, that maybe I miss in the chat live, that you just want to talk about, I do try to go through the comments after every video, and it's clear to me that that is the way to YouTube's heart right now. So if you could take the step to put in comments to this video and others on the channel that you enjoy, I would really appreciate it. And that is the request for today. I promise not to get too solicitous of you in the future. This is about talking about things with you all in the community and with the headlines that I've decided to talk about today. So that's it. If you've got comments, leave them. I try to answer as many that are requiring of answer as I can. And thank you so much for the help in supporting this channel. I couldn't do it without you. So welcome to Hangouts and Headlines. I will look at the comments right now in the chat so that we can talk a little bit about Hangouts. Just Jay says, yay, glad it worked. I'm glad too. What's really interesting is I follow the analytics as they come in when I put a video up, and you can see the viewership kind of curve down into a flatness that suggests that YouTube isn't sending it to anybody else because we say certain words that the robots don't like in that video, and then yet it just powers right through it when all the comments come in so fast. So thank you to everybody again. Sandy, thank you for gifting 5 Hoeg Law memberships. It's so appreciative. I really can't do this without all the support of people like you, so thank you so much. I hope if you get a membership, you enjoy it. I do live streams now on a fairly regular basis. I'm hoping to keep this up into the future. I think I can do about one a week, so that's what the Hangouts and Headlines cadence is likely to be. As I said in the last video, midweek, 10 a.m. Eastern is probably when these are going to wind up. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, most likely. But depending on when things pop, depending on what my schedule is in the actual practice of law land or anything else that I'm doing, these might bounce around a little bit more. But we're trying to find a cadence that works. I certainly am. I know you guys are always here supporting the channel and having these conversations. It's me that's the limiting reactant there. But I'm trying to get here more, and I think we're doing a pretty good job so far. I'm not just dying in the chair in my bedroom after these broadcasts like I was for a certain period of time just home from the hospital. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Abigail says she rode the struggle bus here, but she made it. Good to have you here, Abigail. To some extent, I did too. I mentioned that Nintendo Direct to begin with. I usually give myself a lot more than half an hour just to make sure that I've hit the buttons properly to be ready for a conversation with you all. But this time, I wanted to have that time with my daughters. They got up early just for it. And so I only gave myself about half an hour to go through the articles that I had already prepped, get them all ready behind the scenes, make sure the windows are working properly. But if something breaks down in the middle of this stream, you can blame Nintendo for it. So I also, too, was coming in a little hot to this video, but I'm excited about having this conversation with you all. Me and Maya, it is so nice to have H&H back. I agree. I'm really excited about doing these. I'm excited about the virtual legalities that I'm doing. I'm excited about having these conversations with you all. And I cannot say that I was super excited about making content for big sections of time in the last couple of years. So that's just being 100% honest with you all. I like having this community. I like getting information out there, but the actual act of hitting the button, making sure all the windows were sized properly, doing the various things you have to do to get online and to have these conversations with you all, I was not so enthusiastic about that whole process for at least a chunk of time in the last little while. So thank you so much for being here. Britt, thank you so much for the super chat. Reasonable minds can differ. However, if you look at the ads in question, and the first thing that comes to mind is the Reich, getting me early with those words, Britt, that falls between the second and fourth. That is a you problem, not a society problem. Well, we're going to talk about this article. This is an article that I actually quite like. I don't often get to talk about articles that I enjoy or that I think are useful or informative in this space. I like this article a lot, but I do think it has a couple of fatal flaws, one of which Britt might be hinting at here. And we're going to talk about that as part of our conversation. Thank you so much for the support of the channel, Britt. I'm going to let people see the rest of my face now, if I can hit the right buttons here. But thank you so much for the support. And I do think that's a part of the conversation that we are going to have when we get into the article today. Rose or Rossi says, I couldn't understand what everyone was upset about. I think what everyone was upset about is an important part of this conversation. Not the what of it, but whether or not everyone was in fact upset about it and how this machine kind of operates on the internet. After watching some of the vids, I think everyone is upset because they want to be upset. I think there is a portion of that we need to discuss. That's why this article from The Atlantic is framed as there being something specifically wrong with the discourse. I think there are a lot of times when anybody that's online for any appreciable amount of time can look at the situation on social media and say something is wrong. And this is one of those times. And I think The Atlantic author does a fairly good job of kind of cutting to the bone of what the issue is, even if I think they missed the forest for the trees a little bit. We're going to talk about that as part of this conversation. We are, I promise. Naomi RG says, it's good to see you, Hoeg. We are so glad that you are here to be here. Hello to Mrs. Hoeg as well. Mrs. Hoeg and eldest daughter are at the farmer's market during this taping. Usually she is here to make sure that everything is going all right and in the chat with you a little bit, but Thursday is farmer's market day. It is awesome that my wife and daughter go to the farmer's market and they have specific people that they love, that they make sure have the stuff that they are going to be looking for that day there for them. And so they are there right now. They might be back by the time we're in the kind of later stages of this video. But as it stands right this second, we're pretty much free form right now. We have no guardians, no parental permission here. We are just doing our best, even without the help of Mrs. Hoeglaw in the background. So they are having a good one this morning. I hope it's a little rainy here in Southeast Michigan, but they love the farmer's market on Thursdays. Abigail says, wait, we're covering an article that's well written for once. It is. There's a lot of insight and information in the article we're going to go over today, even if I think there are still things we can kind of critically examine as the logic in this article and how it is written. But it is a good article that I think is informative, and I wanted to pull it up for us to discuss today. That's pretty neat, Abigail finishes, and it is. I don't do it enough, honestly. If I had my druthers, there'd be one really critical, this person is trying to deceive you with this article, kind of hangouts and headlines, to go with one, there's a lot of insight here, even if it is incendiary or ridiculous on its face version of hangouts and headlines. I would do that every time, but unfortunately, our media landscape as it stands right now is not offering me a lot of choices for that insightful category to present to you all in hangouts and headlines. I would really prefer it to be that kind of balance, but we'll see as we go on in the future. Darth Mac, thank you so much for the super chat. Glad to see you are doing better, Hoeg. I really appreciate your virtual legality about the payment processors fiasco. I really thought it was important to make that video. I was not signing up when I started that process for a 90-minute or so long video. I really don't have those in me all together all too often. But I'm glad you found it insightful. I really think it's an important message and an important thing to be discussing, even though what you wind up having to defend as part of that conversation is maybe not so easily defendable. So thank you so much, Darth Mac. I appreciate it. I didn't have any idea it was happening. Yeah, I think there are a number of people out there that are like that. Part of the reason that virtual legality exists is to kind of present news items that would fall through the cracks to people that I think are important. The other aspect, of course, is that I think I can offer some insight and some expertise on some things that sometimes reporters, even when they're not trying to deceive you, get wrong. And so I appreciate it, Darth Mac, and thank you so much for the super chat. Speaking of super chats, Papa Hoeg is in the house. Thank you, Dad, for the super. If you want to be beautiful at 72, it's in the genes. Oh my God, you're getting us started early, Dad. We're going to get there, I promise. This is the most ludicrous quote-unquote issue yet. I consider the last gasp of 10 years of insanity. We know how you feel, Papa Hoeg. We know from your previous super chats and cameos on the channel that you have been concerned with the social media and general media landscape. We're going to talk about that. Whether or not this is in fact an issue is a part of that conversation. So thank you so much for the super chat, Dad. And I promise you we're going to get to the substance of your super chat when we talk about the headline at issue. All right. So we had a number of super chats this morning. Thank you so much, everybody, for the support. You don't have to super chat to have me talk to you on video. It's just that those pop up in my stream. The most easy for me to see. If you've got comments or questions that you want to flag for me as we're going through the headlines, please do mark them as @HoegLaw or Q:question, something else that designates it as something that you want my commentary on. I do mention to folks that there will be a section at the end of a Hangouts and Headlines video where we go through questions and comments more specifically, that the cadence of these videos is essentially Hangouts, popping in, checking in on the community, the headline, the substance, where I go into deep detail, similar to a virtual legality, on the nature of whatever the subject matter is, and then kind of a post-mortem, revisiting with the community, answering questions, detailing comments at the end. So if you've got one of those and you can't flag me down in the middle, I'm not as good at this as some of my colleagues that can do both or that have a producer to pull questions for them. So I do the analysis and then I come back for questions and comments. So please do hold on to those if you have them. And like I said at the top of this video, if you've got comments that you think I'm entirely going to miss or that require a longer answer, leave them to this video itself. YouTube apparently is just responding very positively to people putting comments down very quickly, very rapidly as part of the video going public. So please do that as much as you can. If you are so inclined, don't just leave fake comments or something like that. But if you've got a question or comment, I do try to go through them after the video, and I will try to do that again this time. All right, more super chats. You guys are too fast for me this morning. Dragon Nerd 2, thank you for the super. Farmers markets are a controversial topic in my family. Oh, I hope I didn't touch any live wires with that one. Half are tired of them being more crafts, or I think that is multi-level marketing stuff, and want to bring it back to just produce/food, and other half love the crafts. Yeah, our current local farmers market is still primarily produce and baked goods, but I do think that my family in particular likes the baked goods more than the produce. There aren't a lot of craft things, I don't think, but Mrs. Hoeglaw may come into the comments of this video herself later on and say, yeah, Hoeg was completely wrong on that. There's crafts everywhere, people making stuff, and I've got 3 bags that I bought this morning to prove it. I don't know, but in my visits with them to this, I see mostly produce and baked goods. Abigail says, I'm on the opposite side of things, Papa Hoeg, and I love that we're both considered reasonable minds here. Heart, Hoeg, big brain. Absolutely. Reasonable minds can and do differ. Part of this conversation is that everybody that differs with you is not de facto an unreasonable mind or something that you should put a label on and put them on the other side and say it's okay to punch, kill, or what otherwise do bad things to them. We're going to talk about that as part of this conversation, definitely. Rid says, I don't think the ad issue is that simple. I think when you talk about genes being handed down, you know what you're doing, and it's with the perfect amount of plausible deniability. I think that's a part of this story as well. One of the reasons that this article, I think, is a little bit mistargeted is because we can talk about the failures of social media and discourse at length, but when you talk about it in connection with an advertising campaign, you can't just discount the fact that having a conversation about an advertising campaign at all is already a win for the advertisers. This is what they were aimed at in some important respect, is getting people talking about them. Having a Hangouts and Headlines, yes, I'm sure that makes the difference between whether American Eagle will sell jeans or not, is that we're talking about it here. But it is part of the story that, yes, discourse is broken. We're going to talk about that, certainly. But when you have a third party hoping that the discourse will be broken, if not engaging in it themselves, then that puts its thumb on the scale of whether or not we're actually talking about organic conversation at all. So it's not as simple as this Atlantic article points out. We're going to talk about that when we get into it. But it's also not necessarily what's being described even by the people that are supposedly outraged about this particular topic. Patrick says, from someone who does some marketing, I think whoever designed this ad campaign got what they wanted. That's what we were just saying. I hadn't thought about American Eagle for years. I'm thinking about them now. Yes, American Eagle as a name, as a brand that sells you blue jeans, is now something that people are talking about. At the end of the day, the primary purpose of a marketing campaign is to get you talking about the brand and potentially the fact that you might need blue jeans, and to think about that brand when you're in the store potentially buying blue jeans. And so to the extent that that's the goal, everything else is kind of ancillary to that conversation. And that's a part of understanding what's happening here in the discourse or otherwise. Absolutely. Let's see here. Susano, a la Richard. She's viewed as an attractive lady. Sydney Sweeney, I presume we're talking about here. Not Mrs. Hoeg, although she is an attractive lady. I can vouch for that. It's a jeans ad. This isn't the first time a company played on the idea. It is not. In fact, we might be able to pull up a copy of an 80s video that has a similar kind of concept on this wordplay. But yes, it's certainly a different media environment than others before it have been. Abigail says, so just to clarify, if we comment immediately after this video goes from live to replay, that's what the algorithm likes best? No, I think it likes it right now if you comment as the video goes on, and then it probably does another check as replay. What I can tell you from the analytics that I can see when we put these things up is that it takes a statistic snapshot when we record the video live streaming right now. It takes that snapshot and holds it as a bit of record keeping that the robot uses to determine whether or not it should send the archive to other people to see. And then it keeps track of how that archive is received, like we just posted a virtual legality video, and that was all that we did. So I think there are essentially two phases to how the YouTube robot looks at these things. But again, it doesn't share anything with us. So we're just guessing as best as we can tell. But I can tell you absolutely 100% that the virtual legality video we put up on Friday that was talking about payment processors had one of those hiccups that you can see when the algorithm does not like what you just made. It has that flatlining, all these comments come in, and then it immediately bursts through the moon, at least for my channel. And so those comments are clearly a part of the process of making YouTube happy. And so I will call for them if you've actually got comments, and on the understanding that I do look at them and I do try to respond to those that need response. Nicolade says, live Hoeg, yay. I am alive. I also say yay to that. And I'm also live streaming, so you can say yay to that as well. Nice to see you, Nicolade. And I apologize for any butchering of that pronunciation that I've already done. Hill CT asks, LOL, what about the third half of farmers market goers who enjoy, I never remember how to say this. It's the multi-level marketing schemes. Yes. Are there people that specifically go out there to find Amway products? I don't know. I couldn't tell you that. To some extent, the farmer's market is a little bit of an alien environment, alien experience for me as it stands. But there is a certain amount of community and enjoyment from going and seeing the same people and getting, at least after you've gone through the process a couple times, higher quality goods than you might be otherwise able to find elsewhere. So I like the farmer's market itself. I don't seem to like it as much as my wife and daughter do, but that doesn't mean that it isn't a good time. If somebody somewhere was going there just to participate in the multi-level marketing, it wouldn't surprise me because everything is somebody's favorite thing, right? Whether it's a movie, a book, a video game, a farmer's market booth, somebody likes everything somewhere. That's part of the story we're going to have with respect to media as well in this particular conversation. But yeah, I'm sure there's somebody that says, what I'm really here for are the Amway products. Susano says, well, we're also talking about people trying to censor speech here. That I'm not okay with. We are in certain aspects of virtual legality and other videos on this channel. I don't think this one in particular is about censorship so much, but I might be jumping into a conversation that was already in midstream. So if I was, I apologize. I try to grab these on the fly when I can. But yes, I don't blame you for not being okay with censorship. I think people have described that payment processors video that I made last week as the most passionate they've heard me sounding, and it is in the defense of freedom of expression. I'm very much against censorship and the spirit of censorship myself. Obviously, as someone that creates content that is a legal scholar, a lawyer in the United States, I have certain strong feelings about these questions. I don't think they're going to come up too much as part of the substance of this conversation, but you never know. This is all kind of live, real-time thinking from me and from you in the chat and the comments. So we'll see what pops out of that conversation when we get there. Ender Buckley says, yep, people playing the ad and talking about it a bunch of places where you didn't have to pay for it to play. Yeah, well, absolutely. Anytime you can have these kinds of conversations, it's helpful to the brand that paid for the marketing campaign. That's a part of this story, and we can't separate it from the story that American Eagle has its own incentives to encourage this particular kind of version of the discourse machine. And so is it broken? Probably. Is it enhanced by outside parties that are finding it useful for the discourse to be broken in a very specific way? Also, yes. Is that a problem for the rest of us? Probably, but it helps to know that it's happening and to be able to identify it when it happens. So that's part of why I made a Hangouts and Headlines, sorry, about it today. I'll get my branding right eventually, speaking of bad marketing. So let's see here from Katie Cotton. I'm so tired of rage baiting. There is so much that's real news to be angry about. There really is, isn't there? Anytime you turn on the actual news, there's anything that you can find to be outraged about. And the news cycle itself has every incentive to keep you outraged in various ways. That's one of the things we kind of try to piece apart here in Hangouts and Headlines. Hill CT, the marketing campaign has already failed. I'm not thinking about American Eagle. I'm thinking about Sydney Sweeney. Well, this was, I think, the only first salvo in the American Eagle Sydney Sweeney combination. So to the extent they can keep that name associated with their brand, I think they're going to win at the end of the day. I think there are a lot of people out there that think about Sydney Sweeney more than American Eagle. And we're going to have that conversation as well, I promise. Ender Buckley says some of those upset also undercut by their repeated grasping for reasons to go at Sydney Sweeney before this. I do think she is a somewhat polarizing figure in the social media and general media landscape, primarily because she does seem to be willing to flaunt certain aspects of her, let's say, physique that others are maybe less likely to want to flaunt, and that is rubbing certain people the wrong way. But that's a part of this, right? When you're American Eagle and you sign up for the Sydney Sweeney experience, you're signing up to kind of have that simmering outrage, pushback in various aspects to promote your brand. We see this from other brands all the time. We see Nike signing Colin Kaepernick at the height of his kind of social media presence and saying, we are going to generate sales of our tennis shoes by virtue of the fact that you have strong feelings about this brand sponsor. So if you have strong feelings about any of these people, that helps the brand at the end of the day. That's not discourse per se, but marketing people are in the business of figuring out what is going to drive you to associating their name when you are going to buy products that are like what they are selling. So since they're experts at this, it is no surprise that they have all these kind of psychological tricks to use to get you to buy their American Eagle jeans, their Nike shoes, or whatever's in between. All right. Now, I promised you we were going to get into the substance here. So let's pop into that right now. Apologies for not getting to more of the kind of weather and city check-ins. If you want to leave those in the chat, I will probably see them as I glance over there, but we're going to go to the headlines right now. Thank you for being with us so far. Pull this comment off the screen and see if I can't do this properly. All right. First, I wanted to mention that, as I've said before, this channel is supported by the viewers, by the listeners like you. We can't do it without your help. Honestly, the Google ad bucks aren't there in 2025 like they were in previous years. The economy is all weird across many industries, so I'm not out here seeking pity for that. But if you want to support the channel, the best way to do it is through memberships like you saw gifted today, like you could enter into yourself, super chats like you've also seen today, and we have Patreon support elsewhere. Honestly, that Patreon's a little out of date. I'm no longer doing the question time kind of ask me anything formats. I want to fix that up soon. I just haven't gotten to it yet, but if you want to support the channel, that is still the best platform to do it, at least until we are deplatformed / the payment processors end us for one reason or another. So as long as we're still got the Patreon right now, please consider that now and in the future. If you are not into that, if you don't have that financial ability or you don't want to, that is totally fine. Just subscribing and telling your friends that we exist, just having those comments that we talked about at the front end, all those things help. And as I said, if you've got questions or comments for the end, we will talk about them at the end of this video. Now, with no further ado, let's talk about Sydney Sweeney and The Atlantic. So, this article is called "The Discourse is Broken. How did a jeans commercial with Sydney Sweeney come to this?" The author's name is Charlie Warzel. And there's a number of things that we're going to talk about as part of this article. Like I said, I think this is a good, insightful article that maybe has some missteps in it. And that's more than I can say for some of the other articles we've covered in this space. So let's get into it. Let me hit the right button here so that you can get more of the screen. Sydney Sweeney is inexplicably reclining and also buttoning up her jeans. She's wearing a jacket with nothing underneath. She's attempting to sell some denim to women and appears to be writhing while doing so. This is maybe a little bit of an excessive description of what's happening in this video, but it is certainly designed to play off her sex appeal as she sells you her blue jeans. In a breathy voice, the actor recites the following ad copy as the camera pans up her body. Genes are passed down from parents to offspring, often determining traits like hair color, personality, and even eye color. When the camera lands on her eyes, which are blue, she says, "My genes are blue." The commercial is for American Eagle. The whole thing is a lot. Now that paragraph is a lot, right? Because this is putting on this ad a lot of the feelings that you seem to see simmering on social media, but that you might not actually associate with this ad were you to see it for yourself. And so it is already trying to position you in a certain way because we want to talk about that outrage as part of this article. So I don't necessarily blame them, but it is certainly trying to get you to say, this must be something that is tickling me in the wrong spot because this whole thing is a lot. And as we continue with this, I want to point out that the article starts with the very first thing that I think when I look at these various outrage positions online, which is that the jeans play is a garden variety dad pun. Honestly, I think the entire kind of argument could be ended if everybody just recognized that this is essentially marketing copy that is just designed to play off the fact that jeans and jeans sound the same. And what people are adding to that, the discourse, if you will, is in fact completely added to it from other people's desire to either get content or engagement out there in the world and to participate in this kind of outrage culture that happens on social media so often. That's what this article is going to be about. But if we were just looking at this completely in a vacuum, saying, is this a problem? Then no, I would argue editorially from my position to say that no, jeans is just a joke kind of statement. When you start getting into other reads of what's happening here, you're adding your own kind of personality and your own kind of sensitivity to what's happening. But I would say, as some of the other chatters said in the Hangouts portion of this video, that American Eagle knows what it's doing when it does that particular pun, right? Yes, it is other people's sensitivities, other people's desires to get out there and fuel the discourse / outrage machine that are making this run. But American Eagle knew that would happen. It does not take a rocket scientist, it doesn't even take a marketing genius to know that talking about jeans in connection with a blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman in 2025 is going to result in certain conversations. That is the intent of American Eagle. You can't read their minds. You can't go in and say, I was in the boardroom when they made this decision, or I was in the marketing room when they came up with this campaign. But you can look at this from the side and say, if the intent to market things is to get your name in more people's mouths, and this is how it works, then you would have to be a fool to think that they didn't know what they were doing as part of this particular conversation. Now, the Atlantic actually plays it a little bit more conservatively, small c, in this. They will not say that American Eagle knew what they were doing here. We'll get to that point when we get further in this article. But I'm willing to sit here and say, yes, of course they did. That's how commercial marketing works. And so that's a part of this story as well. Then we get to the but, right? And I don't think you actually need a but here from just the jeans plays a garden variety dad pun. But when uttered by Sweeney, a blonde, blue-eyed actor whose buxomness, you don't hear that word a lot, and comfort in her own skin seems to drive everyone just a little bit insane, it becomes something else. No, I would argue it doesn't become something else. It actually is just interpreted as something else, but that's a fair statement. Clearly, people do interpret it that way. Sweeney does not speak much about her politics. For interested parties, there are potential clues, such as a 2020 tweet supporting Black Lives Matter and a mention of having conservative relatives. But this hasn't stopped the right wing from framing her as one of their own. Her mere appearance in a plunging neckline on Saturday Night Live led the right-wing blogger Richard Hoeg, I know that's not right, so I apologize, to declare that wokeness is dead. And here we're starting to see some of the parts where the Atlantic kind of falls apart in this particular argument, which is to say Sydney Sweeney appearing on Saturday Night Live in a plunging neckline, and someone, a right-wing blogger apparently, saying that wokeness is dead, is not really adopting Sydney Sweeney as a right-winger, as best I can tell. It's suggesting that whatever forces would have prevented a plunging neckline from being on television in this particular spot are no longer at play, right? And I'm just reading from what I can tell from social media. I don't certainly have a degree or expertise in wokeness, whether or not it is alive or dead, but that seems to be what's happening in just this anecdote as described in this article. And we will see similar kind of leaps of logic as part of the substance of this article, even though I think the discussion on Discourse is entirely kind of right thinking. Meanwhile, speaking about the American Eagle ad in a TikTok post that's been liked by more than 200,000 times, one influencer said, "It's literally giving Nazi, hi YouTube, propaganda." And so we got to talk about that at some point, right? The reading here is that when you talk about genetics and you talk about blonde hair and blue eyes, you start talking about the Aryan race, you start thinking about the Third Reich, and it's giving you Nazi propaganda. To some extent, that's on you, viewer. That's on you, listener, that looks at these things and thinks those things. But again, I am completely sympathetic to the notion that American Eagle knows what it's doing here and knows that some people are going to interpret it that way, and other people are going to know that interpreting it that way can lead to engagement and content and clicks or whatever other kind of social media currency you want to think about as part of this conversation. And that, to me, is what's worthwhile of conversation, that there is that mechanism that people operate in 2025 that says, okay, maybe I'm not personally outraged on this. I can intellectually see all these things, but it would be useful to me to be outraged about this right now. And so I will, at bare minimum, present as outraged, and then other people will react to my presentation, and maybe they're not outraged about my presentation, but they think it would be useful for them to be outraged. And that's a part of what's happening here in the real world in 2025. And that this whole thing is just a hook to hang that particular hat on for this week in 2025. And it will be a new thing next week, and it will be a new thing after that. And that's worthy of conversation, even if this article, I think, goes a little bit off the deep end, as we will see in substance. And so that's the main kind of nut of the issue as I see it right now. But we've certainly got more to talk about with respect to the substance of this particular topic as part of this Hangouts and Headlines. So I want to capture a member chat that I saw come in before it floats away too far. Thank you so much, Emily Aarons, for being a member for 33 months, almost 3 years. I'm outraged, she says, because the TV/internet told me I should be. I think that is facepalm emoji, eyes rolling emoji, laughing emoji. Happy to be here among other reasonable minds. Yes, I think the internet does tell people to be outraged a lot. I do think there is this kind of social media economy of farming outrage that is now being used more specifically by marketing companies like American Eagle. And that's all worthy of conversation, even if I think the substance here does not make it worthy of conversation on its own. All right. Thank you so much for being a member, Emily. And thank you so much for everybody chatting in the background here. For some, the ad copy about parents and offspring sounded less like a dictionary entry and more like a 4chan post, either politically obtuse or outrightly nefarious. Now, I want to point out here that for some is not a terribly useful piece of journalistic practice, right? As we just mentioned with respect to farmers markets, there is always somebody somewhere that can like or dislike something, right? When you have to go into your article and say, for some, or even experts agree, and those kinds of languages that we see in other contexts in Hangouts and Headlines or otherwise, then what you are essentially saying is that somebody somewhere that I don't actually have to evidence right now, because it's obviously true, think that this is bad for whatever reason. It's politically obtuse, outrightly nefarious. Across platforms, people express their frustration. People is filling in for that for some here. Yes, there are some people on social media that say these things. That Sydney Sweeney is advertising eugenics. We're going to talk about eugenics in just a minute. One of the posters offered context for their alarm, arguing that historic fascist regimes have weaponized the feminine ideal, ultimately linking femininity to motherhood and reproduction. Now, importantly, as part of that kind of commentary, American Eagle, despite the American in their name, not a part of any regime. They are just a company selling blue jeans. They are not part of the Trump administration. They were not part of the Biden administration before it. So, yes, you can start to say things like historically maybe the social zeitgeist of the time started to do X, Y, or Z. But the regime itself, not as far as I'm aware, part of the American Eagle Company. Another said that in the current political climate, which is doing a lot of heavy lifting, right? In current year 2025, a fair-skinned white woman musing about passing down her traits is uncreative and unfunny. It might be uncreative. Jean, not a terribly great bit of wordplay, but wordplay it is. To further complicate matters before the controversy, American Eagle announced that a butterfly insignia on the jeans represented domestic violence awareness, and that the company would donate 100% of profits from the Sydney jean to a nonprofit crisis text line. See, so the company's already trying to get around various things and manage its marketing presence in spaces like this one in the Atlantic. Are you tired, says the author? I'm tired. No, I'm not tired. It's morning for me, but you decided to write this article, Mr. Author. I know this is just an affectation to be in the zeitgeist and suggest that you are, like the other bloggers in this space, so tired of all this. But you're reporting on it. You made the article, so we're not tired just yet. The trajectory of all this is well rehearsed at this point. This is where I think they make the best kind of commentary. Progressive posters register their genuine outrage. We'll be back to that in just a minute. Reactionaries respond in kind by cataloging that outrage and using it to portray their ideological opponents as hysterical, overreactive, and out of touch. Then, savvy content creators, hey, thanks, glom on to the trending discourse and surf the algorithmic waves on TikTok, X, and every other platform. Yet another faction emerges. People who agree politically with those who are outraged about Sydney Sweeney, but wish they would channel their anger towards actual Nazis. All right, we have to break down so much of this, so bear with me for just a second. The first thing that kind of exposes that this author is coming at things from a specific perspective is the concept that all of these outrage machinations, all of the social media economy starts with progressives registering genuine outrage, right? I don't think we have to say that that is in fact the case. In fact, I can see even in this particular outrage moment that there are people out there that are absolutely performing outrage for purposes of farming their clicks and whatnot. And that might be from the progressive side. That might be from the right-wing side. But you do not require genuine outrage to start all of this. And in fact, assuming genuine outrage kind of presupposes the rest of this domino effect that you put in this paragraph, which is to say, okay, you've got a legitimate complaint at the start. That's not required, but that's where you start in your article. And then reactionaries, which already implies that they aren't genuine in their concept, are responding to that outrage. And then content creators jump on and make all of their content and the outrage continues, right? And we're here in Hangouts and Headlines, not trying to foment outrage. In fact, that is the absolute last thing I want to do with this channel, my platform, my commentary in this or any other space that I appear in. But I am obviously taking this article and hopefully being a savvy content creator and talking about these things that you think, Mr. Atlantic Writer, are important. But I do want to point out that your paragraph already assumes that the progressive side is genuine and the opposite side is essentially fake or inorganic. And then you already skip another faction when you talk about people who agree that are politically with those who are outraged, but wish they would instead channel their anger towards actual Nazis. We have to break that down and say, no, there's another faction that says, I think all of this is essentially performative. I don't agree with your initial standpoint, but I do get concerned when you call everything possible Nazism, that you are missing the forest for the trees with respect to potential actual Nazism, right? And that's an issue primarily because when we talk about Nazism in particular as a word out there in 2025 in social media and online, it is used as an inarguable, argumentative position that allows for very bad things to happen to people that you otherwise don't like, right? And I pulled up as an example here a Variety article about Amazon working on a Wolfenstein TV series. And that's a video game that started way back when, but has been modernized, in which the Nazi regime won the war, and you are stuck in a modern kind of environment, fighting them in that modern environment. And what the Amazon folks say as defense of this particular plot that they're going to build in this new TV show is that the story of killing Nazis is evergreen. Now, for people that are anti-Nazi, which I would hope for the most part are everybody in the chat and comments to this video, this is relatively unobjectionable, right? Yes, kill Nazis. Absolutely. Nazis, bad guys, bad deal in the world. No objections here. That's why Wolfenstein became popular in the first place. But when you combine it with these notions of like, okay, we're going to sell blue jeans, and if we mention jeans and jeans with Sydney Sweeney advocating for it, then there's Nazism afoot. You can see how you quickly enter into a kind of argumentative framework that says, if I don't like you, or if you like this American Eagle ad, then it might be okay to punch you, which is how we usually see it online, or in the case of what we just saw in the tagline for Wolfenstein, that it might be okay to kill you. And this is a terribly problematic kind of argumentative structure that we see online all the time, right? And when I joined Twitter for the first time, when it was still Twitter, I advocated for something like this position initially. And this was when I got the most pushback and was called a Nazi by folks on Twitter. And I think if you were there early on, you probably remember that from me. But it was certainly something where I said, okay, so there's something really, really wrong with the way that the discourse is existing right now, with the way people treat each other. That's one of the reasons Reasonable Minds Can Differ came to be the forefront kind of guiding philosophy of my commentary online, which is to say, everyone that disagrees with you is not a Nazi, right? That's the other way to read Reasonable Minds Can Differ. Just because they differ does not mean they are an unreasonable mind. And if you go down this road where you talk about everybody that differs with you is a Nazi, we get into very, very bad situations with justified violence and all these various things that we don't want to go down. But you can see how even where I think somebody is rightly discussing the issue with the outrage culture and the discourse here in the Atlantic, the assumptions made in this paragraph lead you to a place that arrives roughly in the same location as we should be able to kill everybody that disagrees with us, which is not good. I don't think I should have to really underline that for you all. I doubt that I have to, but I want to be very clear on that point, that it is very much not good. And we'll get to other aspects of this in just a moment as part of this article. I promise you that I like this article. I do, but we have to point out those areas where I think there are logical leaps and problems. At bare minimum, to point out that even when you agree with something, even if you think something is insightful, you still have to look out for logical pitfalls, and you still have to read critically. That job never stops. Whether or not you agree with the overall sentiment of an article, whether you agree with a journalist or how something is being described to you, there are still places where you have to be careful and cautious, because people are out here skipping logic steps all over the place, all the time. Although the Sweeney controversy is predictable, it also shows how the internet has completely disordered political and cultural discourse. Even that word, discourse, a shorthand for the way that a particular topic gets put through the internet's meat grinder, is a misnomer, because none of the participants is really talking to the others. Instead, every participant, be they bloggers, randos on X, randos, or people leaving Instagram comments, are issuing statements, not unlike public figures. Each of these statements becomes fodder for somebody else's statement. People are not quite talking past one another, but clearly nobody's listening to anyone else. And broadly, I agree with that sentiment, right? Broadly, when you are trying to engage in reasoned conversation online, it is the rare thing indeed when two people are actually having that conversation like you might hear in real life. And some of the times when I'm having a conversation like that on Twitter/X, at this point, somebody will come in, they will parachute in and say, well, this is kind of crazy to see you guys changing each other's minds and actually coming to some kind of understanding of each other's worldview as part of this conversation. And it really shouldn't be. If I had my druthers, if I had a perfect world in front of me, that would be the way people actually converse online. But it is not what is happening right now. Part of that is because of that outrage ecosystem. Part of that is because of the content creation pipeline. And part of that is because people don't always want to listen to each other. Our information ecosystem collects these statements, stripping them of their original context, while adding on the context of everything else that is happening in the world. Now, that's just communication, right? That's not unique to social media. Everything you say to someone that you put out into the world, everything I'm saying right now, goes through a filter of interpretation and understanding by the ears that are listening to it. That's just the nature of things. Political anxieties, cultural frustrations, fandoms, niche beefs between different posters, current events, celebrity gossip, beauty standards, rampant conspiracism. No post exists on an island. They are all surrounded and colored by an infinite array of other content targeted to the tastes of individual social media users. That is an important part of this conversation as well, is to remember when you're on social media or anywhere else in your life that you do not experience the world in the same way. You have not taken in the same news. You've not taken in the same posts. The algorithm has not shown you the same things. Similarly, in real life, that person that you are talking to has not experienced the same life that you have. And that's one of the reasons why Reasonable Minds Can Differ, to me, is so important, is to understand the inherent humanity in someone else that lived a different life, that's going through something different today and in the days prior to today, and to understand that that is going to color their perception of things different from your own, and that doesn't make them automatically a Nazi or whatever other term you might want to ascribe to them. What can start as a legitimate grievance becomes something else altogether, an internet event, an attention spectacle. And again, this kind of presupposes that these are genuine, legitimate outrage positions at the start of this thing and not performative in and of itself. And I don't think we have to grant that ground on either the left or the right. There are plenty of things that happen from the right side that are not genuine and are performative. And I would argue this further, that first step in its entirety is not necessary. That one of the things I see in social media so often is you see that initial reactionary response when there isn't that first level of outrage blowback, right? That you see this jeans ad, you say, I can imagine how someone on the opposite side of the political spectrum would react to this, and I'm going to react to that imagination, and that's enough for me to get that social media clout, clicks, however you want to frame it, and that in and of itself starts the process without even any aspect of the genuine outrage to start out with. So there are various areas in which this is broken. This is one of the reasons I like this article so much, is it makes all these thoughts spin in my head and makes me think about these things differently and more completely than I had before. And that's what a good opinion piece can do. But that doesn't mean that every aspect of every sentence here is what I would consider accurate or complete. Electoral politics, activism, getting people to stream your SoundCloud mixtape, all of it relies on attracting attention using online platforms. Yes, that social media clout we talked about. The Sweeney incident is useful because it allows us to see how all these competing interests overlap to create a self-perpetuating controversy. But this article does skip that first step, which is that the marketing company, American Eagle itself, knows that this is the world in which we operate in 2025, and they played a part in this. Did American Eagle know what it was doing when it made the Sweeney advertisement? I think the answer to this is an unequivocal yes. Casting Sweeney to begin with supports this theory. Her image has been co-opted by the right, accurately or not, in part because of where she's from, the Mountain West, and some of her hobbies, fixing cars. Even her figure has become a cultural stand-in for the idea, pushed by conservative commentators, that Americans should be free to love boobs. All right, now we got to take a step back here on this particular sentence. I know that many of you have come into the comments or chat and tried to guess at or otherwise describe my political affiliation, and I have not really shared that with you because I find that distracting from the actual understanding of these articles and the understanding of the legal and business issues that I discuss in Virtual Legality. Please do, if you've got a comment and you want to take a crack at it, leave it in the video as we talked about at the top, because I'm interested in those things. But I will say right now, unequivocally, that if, as described by these so-called conservative commentators, it is the conservative position that Americans should be free to love boobs, I am a conservative. I will stand by that position if this sentence is accurate as described. Now, I don't think it is, for the record. My history as a youngster was very much not that the conservative position was free love to boobs. That is not what I saw when I was a kid or a teenager. But as described in this sentence, I don't know how to fight against that. If that is an actual political position, you can mark me down for that political side. Sweeney's cultural associations with conservatism have also been helped along by an Instagram post she made in 2022 featuring photos from a surprise hoedown party for her mother's 60th birthday. Online sleuths found separate photos depicting guests in MAGA-style hats and Blue Lives Matter gear, Blue Lives Matter being a police backing initiative, which led to a backlash. A marketing executive with enough awareness of Sweeney's image and the political and cultural conversation around her might have figured that an ad featuring her talking about her good genes would draw eyeballs. Well, yes, they would, wouldn't they? And it did. So you would say that that was a pretty smart marketing position. And in fact, others are not quite as circumspect as The Atlantic is, right? So if we look at, not this article, let's see if I can pull up the right one here. Apologies already in advance. I don't know that I have it pulled up. There was a CBS article that talked about this that actually mentioned that American Eagle knew what it was doing here. And I think that is the kind of thing that we usually call out for journalists because they don't specifically know. And if somebody doesn't want to commit to knowing, that's totally fine with me. But I think it is clear that when the goal is to get this in the conversation, when it is to sell jeans and it happens to get in the conversation, the only step remaining is to confirm that it sold jeans, that we can say that the marketing was intentional here. We can commit to that without too far being afraid that we are wrong in our assumptions there. This does not mean that some of the outrage isn't culturally significant. Those who have spoken out about the advertisement, aren't doing so in a vacuum. Fears over eugenics creeping into mainstream culture are empirically grounded. Just glance at some aspects of the very public and loud pro-natalist movements, which have been supported by influential people such as Elon Musk. Proud eugenicists have found purchase in mainstream culture on platforms such as X. The Trump administration is making white supremacist-coded posts on X and enacting cruel immigration policies complete with military-style ICE raids and imprisonment in a makeshift gulag in the Florida swamps. So you can see here the author has a certain sympathy with what he would view as the genuine progressive outrage that started this particular moment in the discourse outrage machine. Now, I personally think that kind of flying the flag of who's right and who's wrong on this takes away from your central point that the discourse machine itself is broken. But allowing for this, I think he makes a number of leaps here as to what's actually happening. We have to start out on these leaps with what the heck eugenics is, if you're unfamiliar with the term, right? So I pulled up Wikipedia. Absolutely do not recommend Wikipedia as a source for something as controversial as eugenics. But the purpose of this point in the conversation is to just establish what it is we're talking about at all. So we're going to use this as a broad 30,000-foot view. Do not depend on Wikipedia for a more detailed, nuanced understanding of controversial subjects like eugenics. Eugenics, as Wikipedia describes it, is a set of largely discredited beliefs and practices that aim to improve the genetic quality of a human population. Historically, the idea of eugenics has been used to argue for a broad array of practices ranging from prenatal care for mothers deemed genetically desirable to the forced sterilization and murder of those deemed unfit. And the Supreme Court of the United States has its own tortured history with allowance and disallowance of eugenics programs that had forced sterilization and murder of those deemed unfit, etc. There's a whole bunch of bad history on this point that you can look at if you are so inclined. But eugenics is one of those watchwords. Very bad. You say it in the context of the Atlantic article in order to discredit the various people that are saying these things. But pronatalism, having an increase in the birthing rate in the United States, which is what is described here and what is linked to in this article, not in and of itself a eugenics position. When you talk about proud eugenicists, you look at the article that they link to, and you find a reference to a race science blogger named Crimu on Twitter/X, and you go and you look at the summary of what they actually describe here, you see nothing approaching eugenics. And I mention this not as a defense of eugenics, certainly, but as a defense of getting to the bottom of what an article writer is actually talking about. If you're going to call somebody out in 2025 as a proud eugenicist, you better be able to have the receipts for that kind of assumption. And that article that you link to doesn't. That particular person talks about IQ differences and various things that you can say lead to a kind of eugenics-based position, but is certainly not anything that we would describe as a proud eugenicist. There's no calling for sterilization or those kinds of things in that article. And that's where I would caution you, if you're going to advocate any type of argumentative position, that you only write the checks that you can actually cash. That this costs you, in your article that I think is generally rightly focused, this costs you cachet, political capital, social capital, however you want to frame it, because you are taking these leaps in order to establish something that I don't understand, bona fides of the genuineness of the argument in a way that only takes away from the actual concept that you are putting forth. So put this in the bucket with the conservatives are for boobs sentence. There's a lot of leaps of logic here at the end, but the overall thesis of this article, I think, is still a good one. It just doesn't mean that we get to ignore all the critical thinking that we would apply to other articles. But all of this reality is stripped away by opportunists across the internet. The right-wing media ecosystem is excellent at cherry-picking examples that look to their audiences like egregious examples of so-called snowflake behavior. MAGA influencers and Fox News primetime segments feed off this type of content, which allows their audiences to feel morally superior. Very real concerns about the political direction of the country and the emboldening of bigots are reduced to Democrats are triggered by cleavage. Again, you're leaping too far on this, right? If your premise is the discourse is broken, stick with that. The discourse is broken. You do not have to establish that, yes, the discourse is broken, but also the left is right on this particular concept. The left is correct, and to avoid potential ambiguity there. You don't need to go that far on this in order to make your article make sense. And in fact, by going so far here, I think you skip some of the real issues with what's happening in the discourse, and you ultimately make your argument all that much weaker. And that's part of what I see when I read these articles, even when I think it's a good enough one to share with you all here in Hangouts. But it's not only the right that cherry picks. Okay, we're going to balance the scales a little bit. In their rush to publish viral news stories explaining the controversy, The media credulously grabbed examples of supposed outrage, regardless of whether the accounts in question have tens of thousands of followers and actual influence, or just a handful. All right, so actual influence here is going to vary by who's who on and whatnot. I have about 40,000 followers on Twitter. I don't view myself as terribly influential on these things, but I do try to get out there and espouse a reasonable minds can differ kind of concept. So maybe to the extent that that's influencing anyone, good. One BuzzFeed story quoted an Instagram comment from a user who is not a public figure, just a person with 119 followers. This kind of amplification where non-public figures become stand-ins for public opinion is a dangerous game. Now, didn't you just quote somebody that had 200,000 likes on a TikTok or something along those lines? I mean, yes, it's a dangerous game, but aren't you, Mr. Author, involved in this yourself as part of this entire conversation? What winds up happening in these scenarios is that everyone gets very mad in a way that allows for a touch of moral superiority and is also good for creating online content. The Sweeney ad, like any good piece of discourse, allows everyone to exploit a political and cultural moment for different ends. Some of it is well-intentioned. Some of it is cynical. I would argue that most of the outrage mechanisms are cynical, 90% or more. Almost all of it persists because there are deeper things going on that people actually want to fight about. The polarized discourse obscures the real possibility that the majority of people encountering this ad are uninvested, passive consumers. Rather than having any conviction at all about the entire affair, they're consuming this discourse the way that people consume sports contents about players infighting in a locker room, or the way that people read celebrity gossip. And having been online in the content creation space long enough, I will tell you that even in LawTube, even amongst lawyers discussing things like cases live or other commentary like Lawyers and Dragons, there are folks that are eager to see drama. There are folks that are eager to see friends or supposed colleagues get mad at each other and behind the scenes backstabbing and all of this kind of absolutely fictionalized, dramatic stuff that helps them have some kind of entertainment value out of the content being created. So that does in fact happen. Perhaps this is why American Eagle hasn't issued a panic statement about the ad, or why its stock price, barring a small fluctuation, hasn't changed much. Or perhaps it's because this is entirely intentional. This is what a marketing campaign does. For some, the stakes are high. For others, this is content to be consumed in a moment of boredom. And in fact, speaking of American Eagle on this point, there was a article grab. Now, this is from Megan Basham, who I understand is a right-wing influencer journalist here. So take it as you will, score it however you would see. That in E! News, there is a American Eagle response to TMZ that says the absurd response from some corners of the internet is absolutely not reflective of how American Eagle's customers feel. The rep said their independent polling found that 71% of respondents thought the commercial was appealing. Now, obviously that question in and of itself kind of asks, okay, well, yes, if you've got Sydney Sweeney trying to get her jeans on in a commercial, for the most part, a lot of people are going to find that appealing as a concept. The tagline, some of the other stuff that goes around it, we don't really know. So, but again, American Eagle is out there saying it's performing as intended, which is what we can expect from a marketing campaign like this one. The internet loves Sweeney, not as one might love, say, a person, but as one might love an object, an atomic unit of content. That is how all celebrity culture is consumed, right? You don't actually know these people. Her image is fawned over, but also analyzed, co-opted, and monetized. She is savvy enough to get a piece of the action too, hence selling her bathwater and these jeans. But the internet loving you, it should be said, is not often a good thing. I would argue, again, from experience here, and having had my community come together so strongly in helping me when I was in the hospital, that it can be a good thing. I think not often is probably properly replaced with often not. Being on the internet, being a public figure of any kind is often trying, is often stressful. There are people that will say the nastiest things about you and otherwise try to drag you into all that drama I talked about earlier. So it is often not a good thing, but not often. I think more times than not, my presence here online has helped my life, helped my family's life, and helped in very important ways. That is, in fact, a good thing. But it is totally justified to say the internet overall creates monsters of seemingly everybody. It is a hellscape. I've mentioned that in the past. Its desire, says the author, is limitless. It ingests a person and slowly turns them into a trend, a main character, a thing that people struggle to speak normally about. I do think I have seen certain aspects of that from my very limited exposure. I'm certainly not Sydney Sweeney or any of these really famous celebrities. Perhaps the impulse to label these predictable culture war moments as discourse reflects a need to make all the anger and fighting mean something. Discourse suggests a process that feels productive, maybe even democratic, but there's nothing productive about the end result of our information environment. What we're consuming isn't discourse. It's algorithmic grist for the mills that power the platforms we've uploaded our conversations onto. The grist is made of all of our very real political and cultural anxieties ground down until they start to feel meaningless. The only thing that matters is that the machine keeps running, the wheel keeps turning, leaving everybody feeling like they've won and lost at the same time. I do think the people that get really deeply invested in social media, that do that doom scrolling thing that you hear so often about, can get into this place where they feel like nothing of importance can actually change, that everything is doom and gloom, and that you can get into this place where you can feel like you've won and lost at the same time. I think this is probably too strong, that there is real value to the social media landscape, that we can continue to mine, that we can have reasonable minds differing on important issues of the day, that we can learn each other's perspectives better and hopefully grow as human beings. I am not as deeply cynical as this article finishes off with, but I think this is an important conversation for everybody to have and for everybody to think about, especially when they're participating in these social media landscapes, when they're leaving comments to the video, as I hope you do, when you're leaving chat commentary in this conversation. And that is the article that I wanted to cover with you today. We don't have like a whole list of 25 articles as we often do in this space, but now we are ready to once again go back to some hangouts and headlines. So folks, what did you think about all that? Did you leave any comments asking me questions? Do you have any comments for me right now? At Hoglami, leave a super chat, do those membership things, whatever else you want to do. I will try to take some questions here before we leave for the day. I see somebody has given gifts. I think I might recognize that face, so let me see if I can grab those now as part of this process. Real life fake wizard, formerly David of Lawyers and Dragons. Thank you so much for gifting 5 Hoglaw memberships. I really appreciate it. I can't do it without folks like you, especially folks like you, David, who helped so much with Lawyers and Dragons. I am deeply interested in this kind of conversation in the media landscape, both legacy and social now at this point. And I really appreciate you helping support these conversations in a space like this one on YouTube. So thank you so much. Real life fake wizard. Please do check out his channel, folks. He is often talking about issues like this one. Sometimes he even delves into talking about things like video game licensing agreements and otherwise stepping on my toes and trying to take over my space. But we love him. We love him anyway, and we check out his content all the time. Please do check it out when you get the chance. I really appreciate it. All right. Let's see here. Katie Cotton says, Britt, there's a social psychological phenomenon that says that more attractive people are smarter, that we think that attractive people have more intelligence. Well, that would certainly explain people giving credit to things like celebrity statements, right? Generally speaking, when celebrities speak on any issue of national importance of any kind, right or left, anything that they say in between, I find it to be very superficial and not terribly helpful for understanding the underlying situation. But a number of people appear to be in a disagreement with me on that there is value to hearing what X celebrity says about Y or Z celebrity says about A. And that has not been my experience, but celebrities in general, because they're on the big screen or on the small screen, are attractive people by their very nature. And so maybe that is in fact happening, Katie. Ender Buckley says the writer did have an apparent bias, but there were valid points made. Absolutely there were. A lot of people are into online drama and DGAF about the thing beyond that. I think that's right. A lot of people are into what I would consider the kind of high school lunch table drama aspect of everything. And the internet bringing everybody together has kind of exposed that cliquishness and desire by human beings to get involved in that kind of drama. So I do think that's an issue. I think the article is right on how this machine works and how the various platforms feed the machine. I think it skips the marketer for some reason as part of this article. But yeah, in a perfect world, I would not have him so openly declare that left is right and right is wrong at the end of that article, because I don't think it's terribly useful for actually positioning the argument that he wants to make in the way that he wants to make it. All right, let's see here. I think that might be all of the comments that I can see here that require answer right this second. I'm scrolling through as best I can. I see Mrs. Hoglaw is back from the farmer's market. So if you have any farmer's market related questions, you might be able to ask them of her now. I don't know. Emily asks, why are public figures' opinions automatically elevated above regular people, though? Being famous doesn't make you smarter. I guess that's the predecessor to Katie responding about smarter and attractive. I think part of what happens in this article when he talks about people being public figures, making statements at each other, is a journalistic understanding that it is more difficult to defame public figures, right? You see all of these articles across the media landscape, many of which I don't bring up in Hangouts and Headlines because I only have so much time, that take as their kind of foundational principle, we're going to describe how people are talking about things on TikTok or Instagram or Twitter or what have you. And in very real ways, they can defame or otherwise damage the people that are making these statements to 19 other followers or whatnot. And I think the article author is rightly pointing out that that's a problem in the machine, but that making these statements aloud in the public sphere is a kind of public figure kind of activity. The law right now says if you essentially involve yourself in an issue of public importance, you can be treated as a limited purpose public figure for the journalistic articles that are made about you in respect of that. And I think that is part of what's happening there from a legal perspective, even if it's not entirely clear from the article itself. All right, I think we're just about ready to wrap it up here. A tight 1 hour episode, I think. Wait, we do have a question. Susano a la Richard says, Hoeg, what do you think about that injecting opinion rather than sticking to the who, what, where, when, where, why, and how? I think it is impossible for a human being to take up the pen and write an article without having some portion of their opinion put forth in that article. I respect the attempts to avoid that. And I think if these paragraphs didn't exist where this author here kind of expressly establishes which side of this he's on, it might be harder to detect. But we could have detected it enough with just the references to things like genuine in respect of progressive outrage and legitimate grievances and whatnot. So I think he could have still gotten his point across without getting deeply into the way that it's a land of eugenicists and not have the evidence to back that up, and all these bad things that MAGA influencers and Fox News primetime segments do. We could have avoided all of that, and he would have had a stronger argument at the end of the day. So I am in favor of avoiding like the last half of the article that he was looking at, but I don't think it's entirely possible, or indeed maybe even preferable, for us to ask our journalists to just disregard everything they feel about the subject matter that they're reporting on. I would rather have some amount of transparency than none at all. Ash Axiom, thank you so much for gifting more Hoeg Law memberships to everybody. If you get one of these, I hope you love it. There's some emojis we have in there, many of which I want to add to as a package. And we do have these live streams that you will see from time to time. You can have membership statements, I think, highlighted for me in the background, all this good stuff from being a member of the channel. I really appreciate for all of the support again. And I think that is going to do it for us today. I'm very glad that we were able to get through an article. If I can maybe keep these a little bit more towards the hour instead of the hour and a half mark, I might be able to do them even more often. But thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Please do leave those comments to the video. Thank you for everybody that checked out the virtual legality last week. Leave the comments to that video, but that is our most popular video in some time. I'm just sad that it has to be on a subject that is so important that people really need to respond to, that they really need to react to, or else things are going to go very, very badly, very quickly. So thank you so much for everybody being here. Thank you so much for all the support, all the membership chats, the questions, the comments, and for listening to me talk about these things that I think are very important. And I will see you on the next Hangouts and Headlines or the next Virtual Legality, hopefully sooner than you can even think. See you then.
Virtual Legality is a YouTube video series with audio podcast versions presented as commentary and for education and entertainment purposes only. It does not constitute legal advice and does not create an attorney-client relationship. If you have legal questions about the topics discussed, please consult your own legal counsel.